Alrighty, can you guys hear me? Great.
Yes.
Awesome. So, see if I can get this to work. Welcome to 485. I'm going to switch over to my document camera and get it to work. Doesn't seem like. Can you see my document camera? It's a lot if you plug it into the computer. Let's try this again. Is it not sharing? There you go. All right, so I'm hoping you can see my document camera now. Right, so this is 485. And my name is Casper Larsen. I'm a professor in the math department. And we are going to be talking about math finance. And this is great because I've been doing math finance all my life. So this is something that, yeah, I very much look forward to. We got the evening slot, and so we're meeting. So the lectures, they are Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6:40 until 8. And then we have office hours. Those are on Thursday mornings, I think 9 to 10. This is all going to happen through Zoom. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to, I guess all professors do this nowadays. So all videos, and doc slides, and they will be posted. And we're using Canvas. Right, so everything is going to get recorded and it's going to get posted on Canvas. Let me talk a little bit about what else to expect in here. So the lectures are Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thursday morning will be office hours, and then homeworks. There'll be 10 sets or so. They will be due Fridays. So this is at midnight. So there'll not be a homework this week, but there'll be homeworks following the following Fridays. So the first homework is out there. You can pull it yourself and have a look at it. So this should give us some time on Thursday morning, so you can ask some questions, and then it'll be due Friday night. What else should we say something about? We should say something about textbooks. So the class is going to be split into two. There'll be two main parts. So the first part is going to be discrete time. Discrete time models. And the textbook we're going to be using is this one. So Steve Shreve's stochastic calc, the first one, and it's called the binomial model. So we'll go through a chunk of this one in the first half of the course. The second half of the course is continuous time. And Steve has written a book that is very similar to the other one. So remember, this was the first one, and he has a second one, stochastic calc, now number 2, continuous time. And this one here is much thicker. This one here is much thicker. This one here is much thinner. So I'll often refer to them as the discrete time book and continuous time book, the thin book, the thick book, so on. These two books here, they have a history. It has not, the undergraduate class here at Rutgers, this is the first time I'm teaching the undergraduate class at Rutgers. And when I was given the course to teach, there was another textbook listed. And so we had to get that changed so we could use these ones here. And the reason we want to use these ones here is because these are the best textbooks that are out there. For those of you that don't know Steve Shreve, Steve Shreve is behind one of the oldest quant finance programs in the US. Started out in the mid-90s and has been running out of Carnegie Mellon for 25 years. At Carnegie Mellon, there's also an undergraduate program in quantum finance. And I taught in that undergraduate program for a number of years, and we use these textbooks there. There's no comparison. These here are the best textbooks for courses like the one we have now. There's no way around it. The unfortunate thing at Rutgers is that we only have one semester to do all this material. The standard approach is to spend one semester doing the thin one and one semester doing the thick one. But at Rutgers, we only have one semester to get through it, so there's no way we can cover all this material. We'll cover a good chunk of it, but these are the two textbooks. So in discrete time models, the buzzword there that people talk about is the binomial model. And the buzzword in continuous time, this is the Black-Scholes. The Black-Scholes formula, the Black-Scholes model. So we will, of course, spend most of our time trying to discuss and understand what goes into these models. The discrete time versus continuous time. This is one way to split material according to whether or not you have a discrete time model and or a continuous time model. So let me just emphasize what is meant here. So when you're talking about discrete time, so trade, and that's what we're going to be modeling. We're going to be modeling trade. So trade can happen at a bunch of discrete times. So we call them Tn, or maybe if you want to have infinitely many, you can have it from 0 to infinity. So trade can happen at these time points so typically the first trading point is at time 0. So this is T0, and then it's less than T1 up to Tn, which is then less than infinity. Right, so this trade can happen at this in discrete model, in discrete time models. And we're going to be looking at the first discrete time model in just a little bit. On the other hand, in continuous time, trade can happen all the time. Trade can happen at every time point. So you'll have T between, say, 0 and capital T, or maybe T between 0 and infinity. So up here you have a discrete time structure because you only have these finite time points where something can happen, or at most you have a countable set of time points. Whereas in continuous time, that's not the case any longer. T moves throughout an interval, right? So that's going to be an uncountable set of time points. And it's this distinction that classifies whether you have a discrete time model or a continuous time model. And so historically, when one would go about teaching this stuff, right? So again, there are 2 textbooks here. And these 2 textbooks, they are used across the US. These are the dominant textbooks that are being used in quantitative programs, be it at a master level or be it at an undergraduate level. There's no doubt these are the standard references. If you're in a PhD program, it's a different story, but for undergraduate programs and for master programs, these are the standard textbooks. So when and if you will go out and have a discussion with people from other schools, either in industry or going to a meeting of sorts, very likely that person will have seen the same textbooks as what you've seen. And so it begs the question, like, why should one do both? What order should one do them in? And so one explanation that people have said is that, well, we should do the discrete time first because it's easier than the continuous time. And so I have a little bit of a problem with that argument because I don't think it's true. And just to put some perspective on what's going on, like historically speaking, like the Black-Scholes model, this was published in 1973. Whereas the binomial model, this is also sometimes called the Cox, Ross, and Rubenstein model, and this was actually published in 76. And so you can see the discrete time models actually came quite a bit later than the continuous time models. And even to make matters, I won't say worse, but there is a model that goes way back. Even though Black-Scholes, this is the one that most students have heard about, there is a model that is very, very similar. And it is actually really similar. And this is called the Bachelet model. So that's another one, so the Bachelet model. Bachelet, he wrote his PhD thesis much earlier than everybody else. He wrote his PhD thesis and defended it in the year 1900. And Bachelet's model is also a continuous time model, and it is indeed very, very similar to the Black-Scholes model. And we'll talk a lot about these models in the second half of the course. So what I'm trying to get across here is that you will see an argument saying that discrete time models, well, they are easier to understand than continuous time models. And so I'm not sure I buy that. So what do I buy? Well, I do buy that often in discrete time, you'll see sums, whereas in continuous time, you see intervals. So one way to try to get at this is to look at an analog. And so all of you have seen a Riemann integral at some point in your life. So if you look at a Riemann integral, so what do we have? We have a function. So this is my f of x, and down here I have x. And if I want to integrate, say, f from a to b, then if I'm doing a Riemann sum, I will be looking at, say, putting in rectangles like this. So I'll have two rectangles, and I'll compute the area of these two rectangles, right? So if I'm looking at, maybe there'll be a time step here of, say, h. Right? So I'm thinking about up here that these time points, be equally spaced. I'll have tn minus 1. I'll have this to be some constant h, which is the same for all time points. So if I would want to look at a Riemann integral and I want to approximate that Riemann integral with Riemann sums, then I would compute the area of these two rectangles and add them up and say that that approximates the area underneath the curve. So what I would get would be, well, I would get the sum, right? And then I'll have f of some point x n. So say that this is my xn, this is my xn, so on, and then I'll multiply onto the width of the interval and I'll sum them up. And this would be a discrete approximation to the integral. So this is like the discrete time. Whereas if I look at the continuous one, well, I'll integrate f of x then from a to b. This would be the continuous time. So working with Riemann sums, when you first came across the Riemann integral, presumably you very quickly moved away from working with these approximating Riemann sums, and you moved over to working with these integrals. There was a limit that had to go from here to here. And the reason that you started working with these integrals and not the prelimits, not these sums, was that it's easier and cleaner to work with the limiting object than it is to work with the prelimits, the things that you take the limit of. And so that means that it can be easier to work with the continuous time version compared to the discrete version. So that speaks in favor of using a continuous time model. And yet, in this class, we are going to start the other way around. We are going to start with discrete models and move into continuous time. So why do we do that? Well, why do we do that? Well, so what happens is that when you move from discrete time to continuous time, the time step, this h here, this is going to vanish. And we're going to be thinking about these points here as points where you can trade. And in today's world, it seems like you can trade all the time that you want. There's not just specific time points at which you can trade. Trading does seem to be available at all time points. So then the question is, what is this h parameter? Well, there is no h parameter in today's world. So that's one argument. The argument that I like better is that everybody knows the binomial model. Everybody, so this is everybody in quantitative finance. So if you are to take a course, you should, in quantitative finance like this one, you are to learn and appreciate the binomial model, because otherwise, when you would move on, go get a job interview or get a job at some point, and you would end up in discussions where the binomial model is being used and mentioned, and so it would be a huge problem if you hadn't taken a course that would cover the binomial model. So it is that's my argument for why we're going to be looking at the binomial model. It's simply a standard class of models that everybody who's interested in quantitative finance, and they probably have used it at some point. So you guys need to know it too. It would simply be an awkward situation to be in if you were to have a discussion with somebody and the discussion would be about quantitative finance, and you wouldn't know what you're talking about when you talk about the binomial model. Be it in an interview, it'll be one of the first questions, and you will say, okay, so in this model, whatever happens, and you would not know what you're talking about. That would not be good. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to start out. We're going to start out here with the thin book, and then we're going to move into the thick book. And in that dimension, let me just pull up the syllables and see if I can get it to work. As you will very quickly learn, I am not very good with Zoom. So this here should be my background. Yes. And so if you pull up the syllabus, this is what is sitting out on the Canvas site. You need to pull it down and have a look at it. I'm sure most of you have looked at syllabi before, and this is my syllabi. There's a lot about grading. I'll talk about grading here in a bit later. What I want to talk about right now is to flip to the end. This is where you'll find the schedule, and it will help navigate. It'll help you navigate these textbooks. So what you see here is you will see the words in Shreve 1. So when you talk about 1, this is going to be the thin book, and when you talk about Shreve 2, well, then this is going to be the thicker of the two. And so this is an outline of what the first half or so of the class is about. So it'll be an easy way for you to figure out where to find more information about whatever we're talking about. I should also just say that there are some things that you should note. And for example, when it says note, and then there's a specific example or a specific result, here there's a corollary. These are things that I think are particularly important, and yeah, and so we should pay attention to that. Have a look at the syllabus. This is quite important. Okay, before I move on, are there any questions so far? If not, let me switch back to the document camera. Okay, so about grading. So we can see here, there are going to be 10 sets of homeworks. Okay, so that's one aspect. So grading. Right, so so first of all, the homeworks, the way that the homeworks are going to be graded are perhaps a little bit different than what you're used to. So over the years, I've tried different ways of having the homework graded. And some years ago, I settled on the following policy. What I had observed was that students would be very fixated on getting like 95% or 96 or 97% correct in these homeworks. And there was a lot of effort being put into getting these homeworks absolutely perfect and pristine. And this is not really the spirit. I am not so, I think time can be better spent than trying to increase your homework score from 95 to 97. And there were really students that spent an ungodly amount of time doing that. So I don't like it. I wanted to do something else. And so here's the thing that I think has worked out much better. So you hand in your homework, and the grader can either accept or not accept your homework. So accepted homeworks, these are homeworks with only minor errors. These are accepted homeworks with only with minor errors. They give 3%. So if you hand in your homework and there are either no errors, no or minor errors. Oh, I see questions coming up now here. So how do I get this thing? Yeah, the name of the 76 model is called Cox, Ross, and Rubinstein. Let me write it down so you can have the correct reference. So it's called Cox, Ross, and Rubinstein. Cox, Ross, and Rubinstein. Okay, so back to the homework. If you hand in a homework that has only small mistakes in it, then the TA is gonna, the grader is gonna mark those mistakes. So you're gonna hand it in on Canvas, and then the TA is gonna mark the mistakes, and you'll have a look at it, hopefully, and try to figure out why these mistakes were made. So for bigger errors, you need to resubmit. And so this is resubmit with the next homework. Right. So what will happen is that if you have a big mistake in there, the TA, the grader, is going to mark that this is too big of a mistake. This problem needs to be handed in again, fix the mistake, hand it in again, and then hopefully next time it can then be accepted. And then if accepted, you will get 3%. Okay, so you can, one of the ideas behind this is that you're not going to be there's no need to be so fixated on getting like this last 1 point and spend hours doing that. That will free up some of your time to try to understand the material instead. And we can all make mistakes. What this thing here does is that if you make a big mistake and the TA catches it, then it's time to get it fixed. And by only giving you the credit, if you fix your mistake, well, then you're going to pay attention to it. And so what this here does over time is that it weeds out mistakes from coming back. It's a bit different than many other ways of grading homework. Over the years, most students have liked it. The biggest problem with this way of doing homework is that it takes a long time to get like one round of homework done, because we are 30 students or so in the class, and right, so we'll submit the first attempt, and the 30 students there'll be, my guess is 5, 6 students that will have to resubmit parts, and then that will go in with the next homework. And then hopefully at that point, everything is going to get accepted. So it does take a bit longer. But I think that's the biggest drawback. In the end, most students, I mean, so there are some students that will not hand in their homework. Okay, there's nothing I can do about that. If you don't hand in your homework, then it's not going to be accepted. For most students that hand in the homework and you work on the problems, ultimately you get their homework accepted. Right? And so 3 times 10 will give you 30 points. Right, so the remaining 70%. So before I tell you what my plan is for the remaining 70%, let me tell you what the standard has always been in courses like this one. It has always been to have exams in class where the students would sit and take 3-hour exams, and then I would grade them. And this is what everybody has been used to. But now we're all facing a new world with this Zoom technology. And so I spent quite a bit of the summer trying to figure out how does one do this. And some of you might already have taken Zoom classes, and it is, as far as I can tell, there is no good way of doing these exams. You give them out. Some of the students in this class, we are in different time zones. Some students are very far away. So even giving them out over a 12-hour period, this is tricky, and it is just prone to problems in terms of who is taking these exams, who has access to what solutions at what point. So the math department, there's been lots of meetings in the math department on how to do this. And I, for the life of me, cannot see how I can hand out grades that is supposed to have real meaning using these written exams. There might be other professors who can get this to work. I cannot. The only way I can see how we can do exams is using all exams. And I understand that this is quite different. I floated this idea at a faculty meeting a month ago or so, and this was not so standard. It is not standard at all, at least not at Rutgers Math Department. But this is what we're going to be doing. There will be 2 all exams. There will be 2 all exams, and this is going to be tricky for everybody. So I can tell you what I have in mind. Right, so there'll be 1 halfway through, and there'll be 1 at the end. Each one is going to count for half the 70%. So one exam will count for 35. So what I have in mind is 20 minutes for each student. So there'll be, we are about 30 students still in the class, so I plan on taking a batch of students, 5 or 6, schedule them in like a 2 or 3 hour window, 20 minutes for each, and then at another day I'll schedule the same amount of students for another chunk of time. So these exams, this will only be the student and me, and they'll be recorded, but not posted. I'm going to record these sessions, so when and if there should be some sort of a dispute or a problem, we have the recording. It will be recorded but not posted. So 20 minutes for each. So I understand that this is new to probably most of you. There are other systems. The system I grew up in Northern Europe, this was the way that the exams were done. And there it was even more brutal because the exams were public oral exams, so everybody could go in and watch anybody. So all exam. So here we're not going to do that. It does take some time to get used to, and there's definitely an art to it. It does serve multiple purposes. It does serve the purpose also of giving you guys some training in all presentation. When you graduate from Rutgers, you are gonna get a job somewhere, and that will require you to interact orally, either using Zoom or interacting face to face. There will be some sort of oral interaction, and the math department at Rutgers has very little training in that. It offers very little training to our students to do that. So this is one place where you'll get some training. There are 2 exams, right? So we can try the first one and see how that goes, and then we can look at improvement to the next one. So there's a student who's asking, is it paper calculation or so what's going to happen in these 20 minutes? And so that's a good question. So what's going to happen in these 20 minutes? So here's what I have in mind. So here's what I have in mind. Let me share my screen. There's a document sitting out on Canvas called midterm problems, and there are a number of them, 19. And then the solutions to all of them. Right, the solutions are here at the end. These problems are this is gonna form the basis of the discussion we're gonna have. What's gonna happen is that I'll start out by choosing one of these problems more or less randomly. Some of these problems might be less suitable. The all old exam problems. These are like typical problems that I'll hand out for the classes that I taught in the past. And so we'll take one of these problems, and then I'll ask the student, tell me about this problem, and what are your thoughts? And then the student will start presenting the problem. And then depending upon how that goes, there'll then be follow-up questions, right? If it goes really well, I'll ask something that's harder. If it doesn't go so well, I'll try to figure out what else does the student know. And so we'll start out with one of these problems, and then it'll be adaptive. That's a benefit that all exams have over written exams. They can be adapted in real time. How are we going to communicate during these exams? Yeah, how are we going to do that? So as you can see, I have a document camera, and I'm not asking everybody to run out and buy one of these things. But lots of you have a phone, and you can quite easily convert your phone into a document camera. So that's one way to do it. Lots of you will have a pad that you can write on, and that would be another way to do it. If all of this fails, there is a tool inside Zoom, and let me just show you. It's this whiteboard. The whiteboard is not perfect, but it will allow us to write stuff. And so you'll be able to write your answers here, if nothing else. I don't like pads personally. I don't like, I prefer very much to write on a piece of paper. And given that we cannot write on a chalkboard, I prefer a piece of paper. So this is why I'm using a document camera. If you prefer that, an easy way to create your own document camera is simply just using your cell phone. Using your cell phone to do it. So there are options here. We can make that work. Okay, so what would happen is we would start out with one of these problems, and depending on how that goes, I will ask you some follow-up questions. Right? And so I will take 6, 7, 8 students in a batch. I will go through them over a number of hours, and then after that, I will assign grades to them. And then the next day we'll move on to another batch. So it also provides a lot of flexibility. With a class with 30 students, there will be other exams going on. There will be students that have conflicts. It'll be inconvenient. It'll be lots of things. With all exams, it's a lot more flexible. I'll put out like 3 or 4 batches of time slots. Students can sign up for them, and typically this, yeah, it will provide more flexibility to the system. So I know that this aspect, this is a little bit foreign, it's a little bit new, and it can seem quite intimidating. So I do hope that after you see it and try it for the first time, you will realize that it is not like that. It's actually quite nice because you will get real-time feedback, and it's not going to be the case that you get stuck on something and then that's going to be the end of it. No, you will get stuck on something and then you will try to overcome it. And so what I'm looking for is your thought process on how to overcome these obstacles. How are grades assigned? Yeah, this is a very good question. So you're used to having the way that it goes is you get so many points, you get that grade. You get so many points, you get that grade. This year is very subjective. So it's important to understand that professors, we are there to help the students succeed. It is just somehow also our responsibility to give grades. I would much prefer not to give grades. And indeed, I taught a summer course. It was all optional. You could sign up for the summer course if you wanted to. You didn't have to. I had 20 students work with me for weeks over the summer. It was a lot better because I don't have to assign grades. People could just get out of it whatever they want to get out of it. But here, there's no way around it. I must assign grades. And I want to be able to assign grades that it has real meaning. And I don't see how to do this with written exams in this remote setting. I don't know how I can authenticate who the student is. I don't know how I can authenticate that this work is being done by that particular student. So how will your grades be assigned? It will be assigned based upon how you do during this exam, but it will not have this clear metric. It is, for some students, it's custom to come and negotiate over grades. So here, I will tell you what you did right, I'll tell you what you did wrong, and then I'll tell you what grade you got. So one should also just know that there is a video of it. So if this is to be challenged, this is perfectly possible, like it is in every other scenario. With a written exam, there is a way to complain about grading that goes outside the professor's hands. And here there will be a video. This will be our document. There is a question about, do we need a camera? No, we do not need a camera. I am saying I'm using a camera because I like to write on paper. If you like to write on a pad, an iPad of sorts, I don't even know what they're called. I don't have one. If you like to write on one, this can be hooked up to Zoom, and lots of professors and lots of students, they write on iPads. So if you have that, you can use it. If you have a phone, you can turn that phone into a document camera simply by flipping it upside down. You go on YouTube, you'll find lots of videos on how to convert your phone into a document camera. And if you don't have any of these tools, last resort is the whiteboard that I showed just a few minutes ago. To clarify, so there's a question, will we work through problems that are similar to the homework problems? So the answer is yes. The problems that you posted, yes, so I will start by, so the exam is going to start by me saying, okay, so here is problem number N. tell me what you, tell me how you solve this. And of course, what I don't want to see is you just reciting what the solution is, because I'm just going to start poking around and see, do you understand it? If you understand it, we'll move on to something else. If you don't understand it, we'll also move on to something else. Yeah, so I mean, the homework problems, you relate it to the problems that are going to be used in the exam. Any more questions?
Professor, I'm not really understand. So we do not need to use the camera during the exam? Like, does that mean it's an open book exam?
You're more than welcome to have your books right next to you. You will be using your camera to either show me your paper, or showing me your iPad, or showing me you will need your computer to hook up to Zoom and share a screen, just like I share my screen with you guys now when I write on the document camera. Right, so the exam is going to start by me seeing your face and your ID. Right, so you're going to have your ID on the day of the exam. You're going to show me your ID. It's your Rutgers ID if you have one of those. It's your passport if you have one of those. Some sort of a document that has your picture on it, so I can see that it's you. Right, and then that picture is going to go up in the corner so that I can see you during the exam. But the main part of the screen is going to be me looking at your writing.
Oh, so does that mean we have like a fixed time to do the exam?
Yeah, this is 20 minutes.
But that is for the oral exam. We do not have like the regular exam, like writing some questions.
There's going to be no regular exam.
Only an oral exam with you for 20 minutes?
There'll be 2 oral exams.
Oh yeah. So we only have oral exam, like 2 oral exam, and no. Oh God. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I understand that this year is different.
And
It is possible. Students have done this before. I can see one of the comments in the, I think it's written to me privately. There's a student who's saying that I've done this over the summer. Okay, so there were there were exams given out over the summer. They were all, so it is possible. It might not be familiar, but it is really possible. So there's a question about whether the exam is open notes or not. Yeah, this is fine. You can bring all your notes. You can have them all around you.
Professor, I have another questions. I think you post a midterm exam questions. So if that means the oral exam will just like random pick up one question through the 16 questions.
This is how we'll start the exam.
Pardon?
This is how the exam will start.
Oh, okay, I got it.
There's another student who is saying that this is how it's done in the French system. Yes, it is. I'm from Northern Europe, but this is how it's done there. Okay. I would very much like to spend the last half an hour doing material instead of talking about all the technicalities. I think the last thing I want to say before we start doing the material is this material here. It has a tendency, at least it has had a tendency in the past, to get involved, and some students to get a bit overwhelmed with it. It can run away from people. And so it is quite important that these office hours, that you come to these office hours and you use them and you ask your questions. I say this in all my courses. I'm going to try to help you the best that I can, but I I cannot read your minds. And in particular now when we are doing this Zoom stuff, it is really hard for me to gauge, are the students there or are the students not there? I've been trying to create these polls, so that will give me some feedback on what the students think. But this is far from perfect. I understand it can be a bit uncomfortable reaching out saying, I need help on this. But that's one way to do it. I'll also say, if there are students that are looking for collaborators, send me an email and I'll create an announcement on Canvas with all these students that are looking for collaborators. So I'll list their names and their email addresses. And then people can contact them or they can contact each other. You just send me an email and say that you're looking for collaborators in this class. So when you contact me using email, you have to specify what class we're talking about, because I'm teaching no less than 3 classes currently. So it can be a little bit hard to keep track of all the students. So just make sure that you include what class we're talking about. And then I'll have an announcement up on Canvas, and then this way you guys can contact each other and work together. This class here is not, I do not recommend trying to go at it by yourself. I don't recommend doing math at all by yourself, let alone this class. So yeah, that's one way we can try to create some content. There's been a lot of debate in the math department about breakout rooms. And so many professors think that breakout rooms, this is a great idea. And then there are some professors that are skeptical about them. And then there's me, who's somewhere in the middle. So there are some people that have had great experiences with these breakout rooms. So breakout room, you take the students, you put them into rooms of 3 to 4 students, and then they will talk to each other. So some people, this is a great idea, but there's also a group of people for which this is very, very uncomfortable. And since I don't know which is which, I'm reluctant to use these breakout rooms in my classes, because there might be some students that are really uncomfortable doing it. I asked my wife, so would you be comfortable doing this? And her instant reply was, I would never do that. If my professor would force me to be in a breakout room, I would not sign up for his live lectures ever. And so I was like, okay, maybe we should not do this. We talked to other professors, they're very happy about it. There are some students that love it. I'm caught kind of in a difficult situation because I don't know who's who here. Ultimately, I'm risk averse. I'm not going to be using breakout rooms, at least not here in the beginning, until I get a better argument for why we should use them. It's of course great having students work together, but it's not very great to have students not feel comfortable in these breakout rooms. So I don't want to do that. So there were some more questions. So there's a question about office hours. Is it possible to schedule office hours at a different time? So currently, because I'm teaching all these courses, I don't know if this is possible. I will try to look into it. I cannot promise that I can find another hour to make this work. I have kids and schools that are closed. This is not so easy getting this to work. There's a question that's asking about what's the difference between B and B plus and A on the final grade. I mean, this is a good question. It depends on what kind of mistakes you're making on your own exam. It is not going to be the same way of grading as you will see on written exams. This is much more subjective. It is much more up to me to decide exactly on how it's going to be. So I understand that it's going to be frustrating on the student, because now the professor might be out to get me. I can tell you I'm not. I'll do my best to assess all the students and treat them equally and fairly. Okay, let's try to do some material. we have half an hour left, and I want to get through some of your material tonight, so we can say we have learned something new. The starting point for the binomial model, the simplest binomial model that one can think about, is what's called a one-period binomial model. A one-period binomial model. Okay, so there's a one period, and then there's the word binomial. Okay, so what are the inputs? So the input in a one-period binomial model is one random variable. So it is a random variable which I'm going to denote psi with values in. So the word one comes from the fact that it's one single random variable, and it takes values in the set u and d. Okay, so u and d are inputs. So the random variable that has the possibility of taking two values, u and d. Okay, and so in a one-period binomial model, we have, what do we have? We have a stock. We're going to model the stock price. And the stock price, well, there's going to be a one period, so there will be two periods. There will be two time points. There will be one period in between the two time points. So the first time point is going to be n equal to 0, and it's going to be n equal to 1. It's going to be the second one. And the way we want to do it is we're going to be looking at a stock. So the stock price at time 0 is going to be denoted by S0. And then the stock price at time 1, the stock price is going to be denoted by S1. So S1 is going to be denoted, and this is how it's written in the one-period binomial model. It's the stock price that you had at time 0 times this random variable we have up here, times that psi. Right, so since psi can take on two values, namely u and d, S1 can take on two values, namely S0 times d and S0 times d. So S0 times u and S0 times d. So we can make this up like a tree. So the stock starts out being worth this many dollars, and then you run to the end of the period, and it can either go up or down. If it goes up, it ends up being, well, S0 times up u, and then S0 times d. Right, so the stock price in a one-period model, in a one-period binomial model, can take on two values. So that's the stock. The other asset that you have in a one-period binomial model is the bank. This is also sometimes called the money market account. And it's also sometimes called a bond. Lots of things in this course will have the same object, will have many different names. I will be using the word bank and money market account. I personally do not like the word bond, but some people, some textbooks, they will use the word bond. I don't like bonds being used in this context because at the end, at least at some point in this course, we're going to be talking about what's called fixed income. And there are bonds, and these are different than what we're talking about here. So the difference between a stock, this one we have on top, and the bank, the one we had at the bottom, well, the difference is that the bank goes from being whatever value, so I'm going to call this for S0, and then I want to put a 0 up here to indicate that I mean, it's not the same, right? This here is a stock, and this one here is the money market account. And so here it goes from whatever value it has to begin with, and then it will grow with the interest rate, 1 plus r. And so R here, R is a constant. You can see there is a message popping up here. There's one question if I'll use curving. I'm not sure curving and all exams. Curving is something that's related to written exams because you have these bins and then you put a curve on top of them. So I'm not sure curving. I don't know how to do that for all exams. It is not my plan. I didn't curve when I had written exams either. Then there's a question that says, what if the stock price stays the same? So you're saying that U and D has to be the same. This is a good question. We'll get to that one. We'll get to that question in a little bit. Yeah, something tricky happens if it ends up being that U and D are the same. Right here, we're thinking about U being bigger than D. But yeah, it's a good question. What happens if they're the same? Okay. So we have these two. We have the stock. We have the bank. We have the money market account. And so that's the binomial model. And now what to do with it? Well, the main application that we're going to be focusing on, the main application that we're going to be focusing on is, there's another question. What is the symbol? Yeah, this is a psi. This is a psi. My handwriting is not, this looks a little bit more like a psi. Yeah. I'm using a letter that is very different than all the usual letters. It is to denote that it's a random variable. So it stands out. It's an input variable. Okay, so what is it we do? So our main application is derivative pricing. Okay, so we have the new word. Here we have the word derivative. Derivatives, this is one of these words that other people call other things. So this can also be called for an option. It can be called a claim. It can be called a contingency. Contingency claim. There are many other words for the word derivative, and it's not a derivative. It is not a derivative in any form and shape like the one you have had in calculus. It is not like f prime. Our main application is a derivative. Okay, so let's look at some examples of derivatives. The first example that you will see, basically any textbook that you pick up on this topic, is going to be called forward. So forward contract. So a forward. So a forward, what is a forward? So this is the forward is going to have a payoff. It's going to have a payoff at the end. So that's at time one, right? Remember, a one period binomial model has 2 time points. So the first one and the end. Right, so a derivative is something that pays out. It's going to have a payout here at the end. And so a forward is one that has a specific one. So the payoff is either, say, k minus is 1, or is 1 minus k for some constant. So you can look at this on a picture. You can look at this on a picture. But if I'm interested in, say, k minus S1, so maybe I'll have x out here, I'll have k here, and then I'll have a straight line. This here is my k minus x. Okay, So this is the payoff. It's going to be random, right? Because S1 is random. So it's going to be two possible values of the forward that you get at the end. It depends on what S1 is. And it's this dependency on the underlying. This is what makes this a derivative. That's why it's called derivative, because it depends upon the underlying. So that's one example. There's a question in the log that says, are we going to do futures? Yes, we're also going to do futures at some point. Not today. Futures and forwards in this very simple model that we're looking at, this one period binomial model, there's no difference between futures and forwards. So we're just going to stick to forwards for now. We'll get to futures later. The other class of contracts that people often care about will be options. So that's another example. Options, and there are two subclasses of options. There will be the calls. We have a payoff again at time 1. The difference is a call. The difference between a forward and a call is the way that the payoff looks like. Here the payoff is going to be S1 minus K and then positive part. So recall what is positive part. What is this? What does this mean? Well, remember, let me just put it up here now. Little note, if I take x plus, what is that defined as? This is defined as what? This is equal to x, provided that x is positive, and it's equal to 0 if x is negative. Right, so that's the plus function, right? So you take a number. If the number is positive already, well, then it's just itself. If the number is negative, well, then you're going to get a 0. That's the plus operator. And so the call option looks like this. And so compare it to the forward that we had right up here. The difference is that a call option cannot have a negative payoff. So this piece here is going to get moved up. It's going to get moved up. So if I were to plot it, it would look like this. This would be my K, this would be my K, but then it would stay flat here. So this here would be X minus K positive part. So that's how the option looks like, and how the call option looks like, and the other option people care about is the put. So the put payoff at the end, this is K minus S1 positive part. So this is again going to be random because it depends upon S1, and S1 can take on two possible values. If I am to draw it on a picture, it's going to look similar, but not quite the same. Here you get something when the underlying is bigger than K. So it's going to be K here, then it'll be 0, and then it will go like that. So these two things here, they look like hockey sticks. So people call these payoff diagrams or hockey sticks. We have 10 minutes left, so let's try to make this more specific. Maybe before I make it more specific, let me try to run a poll just to see how that goes, to see where people are at this point. I created a poll. So let me just try to run it. So click on which one you like and see what we get out of it. It looks like we have a very clear winner. we want to do a problem, and let's do a problem that illustrates this. So here is a specific example of a put. Specific example of a put. So what do we have? We have the stock. We have the stock. So we start out with this case, $4. This is my initial stock price. And in this particular model, the stock can do two things. It can either go up or it can go down. So it can grow up to 8, or it can go down to 2. So remember the U and the D factors. Like the U is what will take you from 4 to 8. So U here is equal to 2, and D is what will take you from 4 to 2. So that's the stock, and then we have the bank. The bank, let's say it starts out at 1, and then it grows with the interest rate. So it goes up to 25, 1.25. And this will be a 25% interest rate. Okay, so now we're looking at an option in this. So let's try to throw in a call option. So people are asking if I can show the graph again. Let me show the graph for the call option. So the call option, this has the payoff. It has this payoff, which is K minus S1 positive part. Right, so let's take K to be 5. Let's just take K to be 5 to be specific. Let's K to be 5 to be specific, and then how does that look like? Well, what happens? Well, if I have my random variable, if I have a realization of the random variable that's very big, so bigger than 5, well, then I'll get something, and it grows linearly. And if it's less than 5, well, then I'm going to get nothing. So I'm going to have this picture here. This here is 5 minus x positive part. That's the call payoff. Okay, so now, what is the payoff? This is the payoff at time 1. That's S1, and S1 can be either 8 or 2. So I can look at the call payoff. This is going to be the call payoff. There are 2 possible values, right? It's going to be 5 minus 8, positive part. No, wait, I flipped it around here, right? This here's the put. This here's the put, right? The put option, this is the other way around. It's the other way around. This is S1 minus K. Sorry about this, getting late tonight. X minus 5. So yeah, 8 minus 5. I could have written here put instead, but I'm doing the call option. So call option is S1 minus K, and it has this hockey stick. So if I am to look at what the payoff will be, given that the stock price is either going to be 8 or 2, so I'll take 8 minus 5, positive part. This is going to be 3. Right, 8 minus 5, this is 3. Take the positive part, you're going to get 3. So the bottom one, so now I'll have here I'll have 2 minus 5, positive part. 2 minus 5 is minus 3. Take the positive part, you're going to get 0. Right, so the stock is worth 8 and 2 in the end. The bank is worth 1.25, and the call is worth 3 and 0. Now, when you do derivative pricing, which is what we want to do, the big question is, what should I put here? How much money are you willing to pay in this model to get the payoff 3 and 0. Just try to think about it in this model. How much are we willing to pay to get the payoff 3 or 0? Okay, so I see now there are activity going on in the log. Is u always greater than 1 and d is always lower than 1? No, that's not the case. It is in this example here, but it doesn't have to be that way. We're going to be looking at what conditions we should put on u and d next time. Should the call graph be the other way? No, it should not be the other way. This here is the graph of the call, and it's exactly the same graph that we had over here. And this is because I'm messing up here. I'm messing up. This here should not. This here should be flipped. The call is unbounded. This here is the call. And this here is the this one here is the put. I can see now why it's confusing. This one here is the right one. K is called a strike. Yeah, that's right. So the strike here, K, this here is called a strike. That's correct. Then one student is suggesting 1.5. Okay, so we want to have something in between 0 and 3. I agree. Less than 3, I agree. We will not want to pay $4. We will not want to pay $4 for this payoff, because if I take my $4 and I stick them into the bank, I'm going to get $5 at the end. Right? So $4 in the bank will give me 5. Right? So I don't want to pay $4 for this payoff. So less than 3, I agree, and more than 0, I agree. 1.5, I'm not sure. It's a candidate, but and then the last one, are the probabilities of u and d equal? Well, you will have seen here that I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything at all about the probabilities of getting u and d. The only thing I've said so far is that there's a possibility of going up and there's a possibility of going down. But I have not said what the probabilities are. Are they 50-50? Is it 60-40? Is it 70-30? When I talk about a coin flip, I'm not restricting to a fair coin. It might be, and it might not be. So how does one do this? What is this question mark here? And I think this would be a good place. This would be a good place to call it quits for tonight. That is what derivative pricing is all about. I'm sorry I switched up these two diagrams, but the main application is derivative pricing, and what derivative pricing means is figure out what this question mark is. There's a question about where does the value of K come from? This is a strike. So this is the call option is given in terms of this function, and this function is described in terms of K. So K is input. You can compute, there'll be one call option that has strike 5, there'll be another call option that has strike 6, and so on. There will be one call option for each strike. Yeah, so derivative pricing is about given such two, given a stock and given a bank, how do you figure out how to price, for example, a call option? And the way that we're going to do it is here in the summer, my kids, they like to make, or at least before the crisis happened, they like to sell like smoothie, for example, or hot dogs out at the road. And how do you teach kids how to price? How do you teach kids how to price what a cup of smoothie is? Right? You have these kids, they have basically no notion of money. And so what should you charge for a cup of smoothie? Right, this is something that you had to do, right? You have to make a sign that says we sell smoothie and this is the price for a cup. What price to put? This is exactly what we have here. Here is a call option. What price are we going to charge for it? Well, the basic naive way of doing that, at least for the kids, was to look at what ingredients go into making smoothie. Well, you will have fruit and juice and time. And you figure out how much time, how much fruit, and how much juice do you put into a cup of smoothie. And you know what the price is of time, your own time, you know what the price is of juice, and you know what the price is of fruit. And you know how much goes into making a cup of smoothie. Well, then you just multiply and you add. And this is going to give you a number, and this number could be the price of smoothie. So we have the same thing here. We have ingredients. We have these two ingredients. I have a stock and I have a bank. Right? This is my juice and this is my fruit. I'm going to mix them, and this is going to create the payoff of the call. The only thing that remains to figure out is how do I mix the stock and the bank to create the call? How much should I buy of this one? How much should I buy of that one to create the call? And as soon as I have that, I know how many to buy of these two, and I know what the price is of the individual ones. Well, I should be able to figure out what this question mark is. Okay, so we are out of time, and we'll set this up next time. And as you can see, this is going to become a linear problem. This is going to become linear algebra, because that thing we're trying to hunt is going to be given as linear combination of the previous two things that we know something about. Okay, I can see there's lots of questions. Is a strike price attached to the option? The answer is yes. A put option is given in terms of its strike. It's not something you have to determine. In the payoff diagram, does the y-axis represent how much money we have? Is x time? No, x is not time. I have a function. So let's call it f of x. And let's call it, this one is what? X minus 5. This here is the call option. This map here, this picture, where I have 5 here, this here is a map that maps x into f of x. And I have x on the x-axis, right? And I have f of x up on the y-axis. And that's what this diagram is. X is not time. There's a question about X is the price of the stock and Y is the payout. Yeah, so I don't write it as Y, I write it as f of x. It's asking where do we access the recorded lectures? You do this on Canvas.
Professor,
Yes.
why when x maps to f of x, does it go further on the right of the x-axis?
Yeah, it goes. But I mean, I could have written this here as a into f of a, and then I would write a here. This is just a dummy variable. And then I would have if.
Okay, I think I understand.
But it's just a function, right? So in calculus, you would have seen f of x being e to the x, right? But if this is my definition and I evaluate f at Casper, you're going to get that this is e of Casper. Like the x by itself doesn't have any meaning. It's just a dummy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what the function is. I'm just a bit confused about, like, when we had 8 minus 5 plus, right? It became 3. So is that saying with x is equal to 8, it's 3?
Yes.
The y.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It is. If you do 8 minus 5, take positive part, this is equal to 3. If you do 5 minus 8 positive part, you will get that this is the positive part of minus 3. The positive part of minus 3 is 0.
And then f of 0 is just 0.
Yeah, if your f of x is defined to be x minus 5 positive part, then this here is your, no, that's not, this one here is f of 8. I cannot write this here, I cannot express in terms of f, right? I'll need another function, I'll need a function g of x to be x minus 8 positive part, and then this here would be g of 5.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, if we have not seen the positive function operator before, the positive part operator, there's a question here about what do we call the plus symbol? Or just positive part. Or you can also just call it plus. Yeah, the plus function. So how does one work with the plus function? So key things about the plus function will be, if I take, so just some features about the plus function. If I take x is a real number, then I can write x as what? I can write x here as x plus minus x minus, right? Where x minus is the negative operator. So x minus, what is that defined to be? Well, it's going to be minus x if x is negative, and it's going to be equal to 0 if x is positive. Right, so if you look at a picture, if I have a function that looks like this is my f of x. I can write this here. So what do? I take the positive part. The positive part will be everything. As soon as you're negative, it's just going to flatten it out. So here it comes like that, and then it's flat, and it goes up. That will be the positive part. And then the negative part will be what? You search for the negative part, and then you just bubble it up. So then it'll be, as soon as you're positive, it's 0. If you're negative, you flip it around and you go up, and then it stays at 0 again. So you'll have a decomposition like this one. You can also do it with absolute value. And absolute value is going to be x plus plus x minus. Yeah, so there are plus operators and there are minus operators, and using them you can take their differences and their sums, and it will give you information about x. And x is absolute value. These plus and minus operators, they come up quite a bit. And the reason they come up quite a bit is because they're related to the option payouts. You use this operator here to be to describe options. And the way that we're going to think about derivatives in this course is using a function. So it could be this function. It could be this is also going to give you a derivative. is the derivative pays out the exponential function. Yeah, so a derivative is nothing else than a function. And then what we're interested in, create this diagram here, and that diagram depends heavily upon the function that you're looking at. And then you're interested in figuring out what this question mark is. Okay, now we're over time. Are there more questions or comments? I'm looking at the log, and it seems like we've gotten at least some of the more recent questions. Are there more questions or comments? Okay, so next time we'll put this example back up, and then we'll try to figure out what this question mark is, and we'll move on from there. Yes, the slides are going to get posted too. The slides are going to get posted, and the videos are going to get posted when I figure out how to do it. It'll all get posted on the Canvas side. Okay, if there are no more questions, then have a good night, guys, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. And I'll see you guys on Thursday. Good night.